Hi sculptors! I'm going to be explaining to you your very next project in this class. It is called the Sliced Self-Portrait Sculpture, and it is going to be you using cardboard that you've collected, slicing it up into shapes, connecting it together in interesting ways, and in the end result, trying to represent yourself through the sculpture that you make, whether it be through all the details that you put into the sculpture or how it's viewed from 3 dimensions, moving it around to try to get the form of whatever it is that you're making, the version of yourself, that is. So again, it's a study of shapes that you construct into forms. Shapes, remember, are 2-dimensional planes, so those pieces of cardboard that you cut out are going to be very flat, and you're going to be arranging them and putting them together in a way that they become forms, which is 3 dimensions. And you're going to be using, this is a real important part to it, positive space, which is where the cardboard is, and negative space, which is the gaps that you create within your sculpture to help make that sculpture successful. For example, looking at this example on the screen here, this one was made out of real thin plywood and constructed together to create a portrait of a person. But you'll see lots of different shapes that have been used and put together, and the negative space, which is the gaps between areas, actually help to define the things that we see. Like the nose, for example. It's not a piece of cardboard, or in this case wood, sticking out from the sculpture. Instead, it's a negative space, it's a gap that goes into the sculpture, and that helps to define it. So even with the hands here and the elbows, all the shoulder area coming down in towards where the hands are, all of those are a combination of positive and negative space. So, what is a self-portrait? It's a chance for you to explore what you want to share about yourself. Think of art as something that you don't just make for yourself, that you don't just keep to yourself, but it is meant to be put out there, meant to be viewed. And it's a chance for you to kind of share part of yourself with whoever sees the sculpture. I think in a lot of ways, a self-portrait helps to bring importance to you and value to you as a person. The uniqueness that you have and the importance that you have in being who you are, I think is another thing that a self-portrait is trying to do. You can make it something that shows an interest that you have, depending on what pose you use or what you have in with you in that sculpture. Another thing that sometimes artists will do is they'll come back to making self-portraits of themselves over the course of their lifetime, and it's just like a little snapshot, a moment in time, showing not only yourself, but what you thought of yourself at that time, and even kind of showing the skill that you had at that time of your life. So think back to maybe some drawings that you've made of yourself back in elementary school, and I don't know if you've done that in middle school with an art project, but you probably will see some progressions in there. An artist by the name of Gambo is one of the featured artists in this presentation, and he's kind of the genesis of this idea of where the project came from. So these are some example sculptures from him, and it's kind of unique sculptures that are almost abstract in a way, but you can tell what the artist had meant to represent. Here's another one that was put into kind of a corner of a room, but kind of building out from that corner a portrait. You can read about the artist a little bit online. We've got a few different things about the artist right in here. Part of something called constructivism as a movement in art. Here's some more modern examples. Well, I guess Alexander Calder is still kind of older. I had a chance to see some Alexander Calder work in person when I went to Chicago. There's this really large outdoor sculpture that is great, made to look like a flamingo, and is just huge. It takes up kind of this entire city space between some blocks in Chicago. And this is another artist. This is a more modern artist. And what I like about this artist is that they have sculptures that are made out of the sliced method, but some of them combine together and then kind of come apart, and it has different forms as the pieces are combining together. You may have remembered learning about Asia Ward earlier on in the trimester. This is an artist that deals with a flat material, aluminum, and cuts it out into shapes, but then puts those shapes together to create forms. And I want you to think about kind of two different approaches for the sculpture. You could do something called sculpture in the round, where you view it from all angles. You know, it's not meant to just be viewed just from one side, but you can view it from all angles. Or maybe you think about doing a relief sculpture, like Asia Ward's aluminum dioramas. Like this one is hung on the wall flat, so you can't see behind it. It still has some dimension where it's three-dimensional and it's coming out towards you, but it's not just meant to be viewed, you know, from all around, right? So relief sculpture or sculpture in the round is where you're going. Here's some examples of sculpture in the round, including the video example down here that you'll see on Schoology of Mr. Granlund making a version of himself. There's some ideas of ways to go about the project if you're doing sculpture in the round. Relief sculpture portraits, this would be a different approach where you're starting with kind of a flat shape and then you're layering the cardboard on and you're building it out from that more flat shape and coming out towards you. Here's some student examples from during this distance/hybrid learning method of school. So here's one student's example here. I'll just kind of cruise through them, and you can see the wide variety of different types of sculptures. Lots of different approaches here. You can choose to do just kind of like your face or face and shoulders. Some students chose to go for a different approach, you know, different sections of their body. This one, you know, made more of a diorama where they're within a different space here. And you can choose to have the cardboard just layered flat, one piece on top of the other. Or you can make it really pushed three-dimensionally, where you've got some space between the cardboard. Alright, so here's the process. There is a planning page for this, so you'll see that up on Schoology. You're going to want to pose for a portrait. You could either have, you know, a selfie done, or you could, you know, have somebody take your picture. But you need to choose a pose that you're going to be using as a reference for your project. So I have that spot right in on your planning page where you can just insert it and have that there. That way it's always ready to go. You just have it up on your Chromebook while you're working, and then you can work from it. And then there's some other sections in the planning that you'll be completing as well. So then step 3 on here is recreating that portrait and pose in the style of the sliced portrait. So it can be made out of other materials than just cardboard. Cardboard is probably the most easy material to get a hold of. But if you wanted to use some plastic or some paper, nobody's done this yet, but if you even wanted to make something out of plywood, go for it. You're going to be assembling those flat shapes that you use by either interlocking the pieces with cut tabs or by using the glue provided in your materials bag. Ways to finish it off. If you do have paint, that can be a great way to make your project look a little bit more unique. You could use other drawing materials on it, really anything that you want to try to push how that project looks and has more of a finished appearance. So your goal is at least 8 inches by 8 inches, you know, if you think of like a cube. So 8 by 8 by 8, if you're going for that sculpture in the round. I would say, you know, if you're doing that relief sculpture, you still want to come out a few inches from the flat surface, so that way you're really pushing the dimension of your piece. But you may not be doing like 8 by 8 by 8. It might be just 8 by 8, and then you come out just a few inches with the dimension that you built out from the flat surface. So that's the process. Take a look at the planning sheet. That's your first step. You want to get that done before you move on to anything else. Enjoy the project.